again. I hear that the early service is getting out a little late. They might be wandering in, but I'll introduce our speaker for today. Laura Calbone works for FairVote Minnesota. She's the Community Outreach and Engagement Consultant for FairVote Minnesota, a nonpartisan, nonprofit group that educates and advocates in support of ranked choice voting. So I'll just let her tell you all about it.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Laura Calbone, like she said. I've been with FairVote Minnesota for about 5 years, educating voters about ranked choice voting and also helping to lead the campaign to bring ranked choice voting to Bloomington, where I live, and also to defeat a repeal effort in Minnetonka last year. So just kind of get a feel for where you all live. Does anyone here live in Minneapolis? Okay. Where do you live? Okay. All right. So you all live in cities that are using ranked choice voting for your city council and mayor elections. So some of this, maybe I can breeze through a little bit unless other people join us. But so basically, FairVote Minnesota, for those of you who don't know, there we go. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We've been working for 20 years to have a more representative democracy, and we believe that ranked choice voting is one of the key reforms to get us there. So basically, I don't know about you, but I've been concerned about our democracy in this country lately, and ranked choice voting is one of the kind of simple things that we can do that can make a big impact and help protect our democracy and give voters more power. So just an overview of the presentation today. We're going to cover what problems our democracy is experiencing, what is ranked choice voting, how does it work, how does it help in our elections, who's already using ranked choice voting and what the effects have been, and then what comes next and how you can help. All right, so let's... So this is a democracy index. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's put out by the Economist Group, and they basically rank 167, I think it's 167 countries in the world on their democracy. And so the United States, unfortunately, has been falling lower in the rankings. You can see on here the #1 country is currently Norway, and then it goes down from there. We are currently number 30. So that's where we are right now. And if you see, they've got categories. So this is a flawed democracy category, which the United States is in. All right, so what's happening to our democracy? So in our work, we talk to a lot of people. We talk to a lot of voters, and they have a lot of concerns, right? So what are their concerns? We're getting more and more polarized. It's hard for people to talk to their family members and their friends. Campaigns are so negative. A lot of the candidates are more focused on attacking their opponents than focusing on the issues that voters care about. It seems like some voters feel they don't have real choices when they go and vote. There's a spoiler problem, right, where you've got a third-party candidate that people get mad, oh, well, now you're going to spoil the election, you know, for this other person. And then everything is so hyper-partisan. So that leads to gridlock and our elected officials not really getting anything done. And then at the local level, so for the city council and the mayor races, we're seeing low turnout, costly primaries, and plurality outcomes. And there can be bullet voting or strategic voting in multi-seat elections as well. So just to kind of highlight the spoiler dynamic issue, in our traditional system, our plurality system, we have a winner take all. So if you look at that example on the left there, you've got 4 candidates, right? And so under our traditional system, the green candidate will win because they have more votes than the other candidate, but they still only have 36% of the vote. So that means 64% of voters voted for someone else, right? And maybe orange, pink, and blue are very similar candidates, and they split the vote, right? That 64% split their vote between those three candidates, and now you have a winner that's only supported by 36% of the people. So that's the issue with the spoiler dynamics. And then, you know, we're in a presidential election year. People are already talking about third-party spoilers. How's this going to impact the outcome of the elections? And it's not fair to voters, and it's not fair to people who want to run for office, because people should be able to vote for who they want to vote for, right? And not be afraid of helping to elect their least favorite candidate by voting for their favorite candidate. You know, you should be able to vote for who you want to vote for, and then with ranked choice voting, voters can have a backup choice. They can say, okay, this is who I like the best. If I can't have this person, this is my second choice. All right, so in Minnesota, we have seen spoiler dynamics play out. We have seen in the last, I think, 20 years, our governor races, a lot of times will end up the winner gets less than 50% of the vote because we have more than two candidates. And we've got a couple examples up there from, I think that's from 2020, where you have a third-party candidate, it's a marijuana party candidate, that is seen as taking votes away from the Democrat, which then leads to the Republican winning, again with less than 50% of the vote. And the Star Tribune actually has reported that some of these marijuana candidates are being hired by the Republican Party for this purpose, to take votes away from the Democrats so that the Republican win with less than 50% of the vote. So with ranked choice voting, that strategy doesn't work, and that's just another reason why we're talking about it. Okay, so then just a more broad perspective, there's a lot of structures that we have that enable minority rule in this country. So just looking at these: gerrymandering, lack of proportional representation, our US Senate. So every state gets 2 votes in the Senate, even though some states have a lot of people, like California, and other states have few people, like Utah, but they get the same number of votes in the Senate. There's a fixed size of Congress right now, so even though population is growing more, we are not increasing the number of representatives. The Electoral College, the Supreme Court, which is making decisions sometimes that most Americans disagree with, the filibuster, primaries. Very few people turn out for primaries, and so you have this small percentage of people that are choosing the candidates that then everyone else has to choose from. And then the plurality voting system, which is what we'll be talking about a lot today. So here's a good quote that kind of sums up the current situation. So the resilience of US democracy is being put to the test. As foreign autocrats resort to increasingly brazen forms of repression to entrench themselves in office and support authoritarian influences around the world, undemocratic forces in the United States have engaged in their own efforts to undermine institutions that are designed to check their power and protect the rights of all Americans. To reignite the promise of US democracy and safeguard their freedoms and long-term interests, Americans must rise above partisan divisions, renew their shared commitment to fundamental democratic principles, and bolster rules and structures that maximize the common good. So bolster rules and structures that maximize the common good. So our current political system produces polarization and minority rule. Okay, so now we've talked about all the problems, right? The good news is there is a simple improvement solution, ranked choice voting. Now, it's not a panacea. It's not going to solve every problem that we have, okay? But it is something that's doable, and it's something that's effective. And so that's why it's one of the fastest growing reforms in our country today. All right, so what is ranked choice voting? It's a simple change to the ballot that allows voters to rank the candidates in their order of preference, so they can indicate which candidate is their first choice, their second choice, and so on. It also requires candidates to get a majority of voter support in order to win. And this person here is Danielle Allen. She's a Harvard professor. She led a bipartisan commission with some of the nation's top political scientists and experts in 2020. And their report cited ranked choice voting as one of the top reforms to strengthen our democracy and improve our elections. All right, so here's a sample ballot. You have your candidates listed, and then voters are able to rank them in their order of preference. So in this example, the voter has selected candidate B as their first choice, candidate A as their second choice, and candidate C as their third choice. Now, voters don't have to rank all the candidates. If they only want to vote for one candidate, that's fine, you can do that. But we do encourage voters that are using ranked choice voting to rank the candidates as long as they have a preference. So I would tell this voter, okay, so you know your favorite candidate is candidate B, you're gonna vote for them as your first choice. Then they say, well, I don't know if I wanna put a second choice. Okay, well, then my thing that I say to them is, do you have a preference between the remaining candidates? Because if you do, you should mark them as your second choice. Your second choice will never hurt your first choice. The second choice only comes into play if your first choice gets eliminated from the race. And then you only have those other two candidates remaining. So you want to have a say in which one of those people wins if you have a preference. So how does the counting work? So under ranked choice voting, like I said, a candidate has to have more than 50% of the vote. So to keep things simple, there's 100 voters. Just keep the math simple for me. So in order to win, a candidate needs to have at least 51 votes, because that's a majority of 100, right? So that's what this dashed line is up here, is 51 votes. We have our three candidates, A, B, and C. And what happens first is they count all the first choice ballots for each candidate. So if a candidate had more than 51 or 51 or more first choice votes, they would automatically win and the counting process would be over, all right? And that happens in 70% of ranked choice voting elections. It's done after that first count. But in this example, no one got 51 or more first choice votes. So the candidate with the fewest gets eliminated, which is this candidate B here. They get eliminated. And the voters that chose candidate B as their first choice now have their vote count for their second choice. So of these 23 voters that chose candidate B as their first choice, 15 of them chose candidate C as their second choice, and 8 chose candidate A as their second choice. And so now we have candidate C has won because they have more than 51 votes, or a majority. And so it's working, basically it's an instant runoff. So if you like look at Georgia or some places that require their winning candidates to get a majority of votes, a lot of times if there's more than 2 candidates, they don't get that, you know, more than 50% of the vote on that first try. So then they do this process, but on separate elections. So everyone has to come back out and vote again on the top 2 so that they can like get the majority. But this just does the whole thing in a single election on a single ballot. So that, you know, it just saves time and money and people don't have to come out and vote again. Are there any questions about how it works before I go on? All right, yes.
If you have enough candidates running, I mean, you gave a fairly simple, straightforward example here, and I know you had to do that to explain it, but this gets more complicated if you have more candidates. And is this an algorithm that can, when it gets more complicated, do you need a computer, or do the election agencies use a computer algorithm to speed things up, or is this all done by hand? Say you have, well, you look at the last Minneapolis mayoral election, you know, what, there were at least 10 candidates, maybe more even. Does anybody remember? But, okay, so say you have 10 candidates, it gets very complicated trying to keep everything straight here. So do they use computers, or is this all hand counted and subject to sort of human interpretation?
Right, so our different cities are using different methods right now. There is tabulation software that other states currently use that automatically tabulates this stuff, just like a traditional election. But basically we have to pass a bill at the state legislature in order for the Secretary of State to be able to certify that software. So, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, so right now, most cities in Minnesota that are using ranked choice voting are using what's called a spreadsheet method. So it's, there's a spreadsheet and and there's all these checks and balances and everything, but it is kind of a tedious process currently, which is why a lot of these cities that are using ranked choice voting would like to see the software certified so that could get faster results. And I know Minneapolis, I think this last time around, used that software alongside the process that they have just to kind of verify that the results were the same, so that can be used hopefully going forward. If the Secretary of State is able to look at that software, they can be like, okay, well, Minneapolis has double checked it a couple times and see how that goes. So now in St. Paul, they have different voting equipment than Hennepin County. So all the other cities in Minnesota that use ranked choice voting are in Hennepin County. And so because their voting equipment is different, they do have kind of a hand count tabulation, which takes more time and is very manual. So again, if we could get that software certified, it would kind of help everyone. Did you have a question too?
A second vote.
Yes, and that happens too. So that's why we do encourage people to rank a second choice if they have a preference between the candidates. But again, it's up to that voter. So, there was an election in Bloomington where there were 3 candidates running. One was a progressive and 2 were conservatives. And people were like, well, some people were like, I'm voting for the progressive and I'm not putting a second choice because I don't like either of those people. And that's their choice, that's their decision. But if their first choice gets eliminated, now they don't have a say in those 2 remaining candidates. So that's how that works. Any other questions about the tabulation? All right. Okay. Oh. Oh.
So I'm just curious, if your example goes to 2 rounds, does it ever go to 3, 4, 5 rounds before it's figured out?
It can, if there's more candidates running, that is possible. But it's a similar process, right? So you're just eliminating each candidate one at a time until you get someone that's got a majority of votes. All right. So the benefits of ranked choice voting. So voters have more power and more choice. It basically allows voters to express their true preference across the full range of candidates, ensures that the results accurately reflect the voters' will, and the winner must earn a majority of voter support. That's really what we think democracy should be, right? Is that you have the outcome of the election reflecting the will of the people. Plus, having a candidate be more accountable to a larger percentage of people makes them more responsive once they are elected as well. And then it also incentivizes candidates to campaign differently. All right, so with ranked choice voting, it just changes the way they talk to voters and who they talk to. So if you think about the traditional system, if a candidate is out door knocking and they see a yard sign for their opponent in a yard, they just keep walking. They're not going to waste their time going up to the door because they know these people are already supporting their opponent, so they keep moving. With ranked choice voting, they have an incentive to actually go up and talk to the people at the door. Say, hey, I see you're supporting so-and-so, but I would like to earn your second choice vote. And here's why, and they get to talk to those people. So they're talking to more voters, which I think is a good thing. We need more communication going on. And then they're trying to think of ways that, like, what do they have in common with their opponents? What are some overlap areas? Versus me versus them, now I'm thinking, okay, what are some ways that, we overlap? Let's see. And then also ranked choice voting does promote candidates that are more focused on the issues that voters care about, because really if you're trying to earn second choice votes from your opponent's supporters, you're less likely to attack your opponent, right? Because you're trying to get their supporters to choose you as a second choice. So that means there's going to be more positive campaigning, more focus on the issues rather than personal attacks. All right, let's see what else. Okay, we already talked about spoiler dynamics and wasted votes. Reduces polarization and incentivizes problem solving. Again, the elected officials have an incentive to actually work together on issues that voters care about, rather than just kind of trying to attack each other. Promotes a more inclusive, diverse, and representative election. So basically, there's been research done comparing the places that use ranked choice voting to the places that just use traditional voting system. And women and people of color are more likely to run under ranked choice voting elections, and they're also more likely to win. And then in cities that do use primaries, so now again, we're going back to the local level, ranked choice voting is more cost effective and efficient because it eliminates the need for the primary. So that's been a huge benefit for cities in Minnesota that have adopted it. Now, I do want to highlight one example that I love to talk about because it just kind of exemplifies all these things I was just talking about. So Alaska adopted ranked choice voting fairly recently for their state and federal elections. And so they used it for the first time in 2022 for a statewide race for representative, okay? And they also paired their ranked choice voting with an open primary. So what they do is like a top 4 primary. So the top 4 candidates, regardless of party, move forward to the general election. So in 2022, the top 4 candidates were a Democrat, an independent, and 2 Republicans. Okay. Of the 2 Republicans, there was a more traditional Republican, and then there was Sarah Palin. All right. The independent decided to drop out of the race before the general election, so they were left with a Democrat and 2 Republicans that were running. Okay. And Sarah Palin spent a lot of her campaign kind of attacking the other Republican. You shouldn't be running, you should drop out of this race and let me be the sole Republican running, etc. And the Democrat spent most of her time talking to as many voters as she possibly could. She's out there talking to everyone, regardless of party affiliation, and she's focusing on the issues that Alaskans care about. And she's also asking for second choice votes from people that are voting for a Republican for their first choice, all right? So, this is what happens on election night. All right, so they count all the first choice votes. Mary Peltola, who's the Democrat, has more first choice votes than the other 2 candidates. This isn't very surprising because the other 2 candidates are Republicans. So, right, they're splitting, the Republicans are splitting their votes between 2 candidates. But what really becomes interesting is when because nobody has more than 50% of the first choice votes, they eliminate the candidate with the fewest votes, which is Begich, who's the traditional Republican. And now they look at the second choice votes on those ballots, right? Enough of those voters chose the Democrat as their second choice vote. That put her over the top and she won, all right? So it just kind of exemplifies how candidates are rewarded for talking to more voters, for focusing on the issues, for being positive. And Mary Peltola, if you've never seen her interviewed or on TV or anything, she is like a ray of sunshine. This woman is super kind, very positive, like willing to work across the aisle, listens to people. And then besides that, she's also the first Alaskan Native to represent Alaska, and she's the first woman. So this is, again, where we're seeing that diversity aspect as well. And they did polling of voters, because this was the first time they had used ranked choice voting, and 79% of the voters said that ranked choice voting was easy to use. So they were comfortable with it. All right, so where is ranked choice voting used in the United States? So as of last year, we have 51 jurisdictions that are using it. That's 13 million voters. It includes 2 states, Maine and Alaska, 3 counties, and 46 cities. And those cities range from large cities to small cities. So we got New York City, we've got East Point, Michigan, blue cities, red cities, Minneapolis, and then a whole bunch in Utah. People in Utah love ranked choice voting, and that's a red state. And then we've got military and overseas voters who use ranked choice voting in 6 states, which are those kind of those southern states down in the, what would that be, southeast corner there. And then around the world, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Scotland, and London use it. And the political parties, ranked choice voting is a major party platform for the Minnesota Democratic Party, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, and both the Democrats and the Republicans across the country use it for like party endorsements and leadership positions. And so, of course, we at FairVote urge, all the political parties to use it for all their endorsements. It is kind of the most democratic and efficient way to conduct those elections, especially when there are a ton of candidates. So if we look back to 2016, when the Republicans were trying to decide who their presidential nominee would be, or 2020, when the Democrats were trying to decide, right, you've got 10, 13 candidates. Well, now the voters are splitting their vote between 10 or 13 candidates. It's hard to know which of those candidates has the broadest support. And also, in 2020, here in Minnesota, we had Amy Klobuchar was one of those candidates. And a lot of people in Minnesota voted early, and they voted for Amy Klobuchar, and then she dropped out a couple of days before the election, and those voters were like, what the heck? Like, now my vote didn't count for anything. Well, if we had been using ranked choice voting, their vote just would have transferred to their second choice candidate when Amy had dropped out. All right, so in Minnesota, we've got 5 cities using ranked choice voting: Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, Bloomington, and Minnetonka. Now, it's important to note that most cities in Minnesota can't adopt ranked choice voting, even if they want to, and that's because they have to meet 2 criteria. The first one is they have to have their own charter, which is like a constitution for the city, and only 15% of Minnesota cities have that, okay? And then the other criteria is that they have to conduct their elections in odd years, so that there's, there aren't like any statewide races on the ballot at the same time. Okay, so that basically narrows it down to the point where we have maybe a couple other cities that could adopt ranked choice voting at this point, but in order for it to really grow and expand and to give more people that option, we need to pass some legislation at the state. All right. Oh, yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah, so it's just the city, so for like city council and mayor races. The question was, in those cities that are using ranked choice voting, do they use it just for their local elections or for like statewide races? And the answer is they just use it for city council and mayor. Yes?
Is there ever a ballot that lists local or municipal elections and state and federal, so they have to, so ranked choice voting would only apply to some of the candidates on the same ballot, or does ranked choice voting mean you have to separate the ballots so that only those subject to ranked choice voting appear together?
Yes, so that's why that second requirement is in place for the cities in Minnesota, is because the way the systems are currently set up in our state, you can't mix both types of elections on the same ballot. Right. Okay, so ranked choice voting in local nonpartisan elections. So because these elections are for city council and mayor, they're nonpartisan, and so because of that, with ranked choice voting, we're able to eliminate the primary and combine basically the primary and the general election into a single election. So the primaries are costly. They have very low turnout. I live in Bloomington, and before we adopted ranked choice voting, we were spending $100,000 on a primary that only 5 to 10% of voters showed up for. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And that 5 to 10% that are showing up for the primary are absolutely not representative of the diversity of the city, right? So with ranked choice voting, you don't need a primary anymore because we're ranking candidates. And it's basically doing that process where you're combining those elections into one, where you say, this is my first choice candidate. This is the person that if I went and voted in a primary, this is the person I would vote for, okay? Now, if they don't make it through that primary, right, they get eliminated in the primary, now you have to either vote for your second choice or you just don't vote at all, right? Which most people who vote in a primary are gonna vote in the general, so they would vote for their second choice. And so you're basically combining those two into one, which saves time, and it also opens it up to new candidates, because it's really hard as a candidate that doesn't have name recognition to make it through a primary, because A, there's so few voters that show up to that, it's hard to know who you need to talk to, right, to get your name out. But then it's also, it's just hard to do it that quickly, because those summer primaries, you know, come up fast. So when we eliminate the primary, that really opens up the chance of winning to more people, which is why we're seeing more women, more people of color run and win, because now they have all the way through November to get out there and talk to voters, get their name out there. All right, let's see. Okay, so in the cities that are using ranked choice voting, we've done exit polling, and the majority of voters are finding ranked choice voting easy to use, they like it, they want to keep using it, and most of them are ranking their ballots. And all 5 cities had record turnout last year. Minnetonka doubled their turnout, which was amazing. But again, that's because you have more candidates getting out there talking to more voters, right, which is going to get more people excited to actually turn out to vote. And then if we look at the increased diversity of the candidates, so we're seeing more candidates in these 5 cities that more diversity regarding race, gender, sexual orientation, and political views. Like in Bloomington, where I live, it used to be, you know, after the primary, you have a progressive candidate and a conservative candidate. But now with ranked choice voting, we're seeing more middle of the road candidates, you know, who are kind of pulling ideas from both sides, and it just makes it more interesting, and more people can find a candidate that they like, that they want to vote for. And our results last year, 91% of the winners in ranked choice elections in these cities were women. 91%. And you're looking at St. Paul and Minnetonka have their first ever female city councils. And then 53% of those elected were people of color, including the first Somali American mayor in the United States in St. Louis Park. All right. This just kind of shows the stats that we were gathering from exit polling. And, you know, yeah, voters find it simple, easy to use, they like it, but they also want to see it expanded to state elections, and they have seen more civil campaigning under ranked choice voting. Okay, so with the success of the cities using it, more jurisdictions are interested in adopting it here in Minnesota. And also, you know, more and more people are getting frustrated with our current system, so they want to see it used for state and federal elections as well. And all of that would require a change in law. So Representative Cedric Frazier and Senator Kelly Morrison last year introduced a ranked choice voting bill, which would have implemented ranked choice voting for all state and federal elections, and would have given all local jurisdictions, so all cities, counties, and school boards, the ability to adopt it if they want to. And then it would have provided funding for implementation and education. There weren't enough votes to pass the bill. A lot of the legislators aren't comfortable yet with rolling out ranked choice voting for state and federal elections. So that's kind of where we ended up. Well, basically, we ended up with a bill that requires the Secretary of State to study statewide ranked choice voting. And so Representative Frazier introduced a standalone local options bill at the end of last year that we are hoping to pass this year. And so what that would do is do I have another slide? I do have another slide, okay. It would basically expand the option of using ranked choice voting to more cities. So again, that's if they want to adopt it. We're not mandating it, we're not forcing it on anyone, it's just giving them the ability to if they want to. And it would set the standards so that places that do adopt ranked choice voting, it's a lot easier for them to adopt it because they don't have to kind of, make it up as they go or pull from various places. It's just easier if it's all laid out. And then thirdly, it allows the Secretary of State to certify that software that I was talking about earlier, which would provide some automatic, quick results, which I know a lot of the cities, well, all the cities that are using ranked choice voting would appreciate at this point. Okay, so how you can help. A lot of it is talking with your friends and family about ranked choice voting and the local options bill, contacting your legislators, attending events and legislative hearings. So actually tomorrow we have a legislative session kind of preview / fundraising event. If anyone's interested, come see me afterwards. I'll provide more information, but Mike Osterholm is the host of that, and so it's at his place, which I hear is quite fancy, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. So we're gonna have the Secretary of State there. We will have Cedric Frazier, Kelly Morrison, our bill authors, there to kind of talk about the bill and get people excited about it. And then we'll also be at the state capitol on Monday morning, February 12th, just to welcome the legislators back and show support for ranked choice voting. So we'd love to have you join us there as well. And we do have a petition, in support of our local options bill, which is on that table over there. If you want to sign up, you can do that. If you give us your email, we'll provide you with updates on how things are going, links to easily contact your legislators when the bill is up for a vote, that sort of thing. And then we are collecting resolutions of support from cities as well as other organizations. And you can always write a letter to the editor. That's a nice way to kind of educate your neighbors about ranked choice voting. And hosting a house party is another fun thing that we will help out with. We usually get to rank something fun like desserts or wines or beers or something like that. We have a ballot that people will rank their first, second, and third choice. We walk through the results. It's a lot of fun. And people get to learn about how ranked choice voting works the fun way. And so if anyone's interested in that, let me know as well. But mostly it's kind of spreading the word. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take questions. Yes.
We have the voters and we have the people we elect who have to run primaries or get their candidacy launched. The other entity, money. And money is often provided by, labor unions, organizations like the AARP, the AMA, companies, corporations, lobbyists, interest groups. Is there any evidence across the country that ranked choice voting has affected how they cast their votes in terms of dollars? Would they ever have a second? We know about companies that split their donations between two candidates to cover their bets, but is there any evidence yet that ranked choice voting affects how they see candidates and issues?
So a lot of campaign money is spent on negative advertising. And because ranked choice voting provides a disincentive for negative advertising, I guess that's the impact, that would be the impact that ranked choice voting would have on the money part of the politics, is just, you know, you don't want to turn off those voters that you're trying to get second choice votes from, basically. All right, yes.
This sounds perfect, and I'm a little bit skeptical. So what are the ways that this can be manipulated or worked around so that it doesn't work as we want it to?
Well, I'm not really aware of any ways that it can be manipulated, which is why I'm a big supporter of it. It's the current system, I feel, can be manipulated because, like I said, people get paid to run as third-party candidates just to, you know, siphon votes away from someone. But this is more, to me, this puts the power in the hands of the voters, right? It's the voters are the ones that are saying, this is my first choice, this is my second choice, and in order to win under this system, you have to get a majority of voter support. It's just the way it is, you know? So I think that is the way it should be. This is a democracy, and, you know, in order to win, you should have to appeal to a majority of voters, you know? And so it's just a way to incentivize candidates to kind of act in the ways that we would like to see more of, which is, you know, focusing on issues and addressing problems, because we've got serious problems in this country right now that we need people to make progress on. Yeah.
Is there any strategy in place to make this a nationwide thing, to have the Federal Elections Commission or some process? I guess it would have to depend on individual states, but is there any strategy to make this the nationwide standard for elections?
Well, I mean, there's obviously those of us who are working on this would love to see that, but it is a state-by-state thing at this point. We don't have leadership at the national level currently that is supportive of ranked choice voting, which, I mean, if you think about it, makes sense, right? The people that are elected under the current system, why would they want to change a system, right? So there's that, and you know, we have a very strong duopoly in this country. They don't necessarily want to open that up to third parties. So it is very much a grassroots effort, you know, of voters standing up and saying, no, this is what we want. And so when we put ranked choice voting on the ballot, voters are voting for it, right? So that's how it passed in Alaska. That's how it passed in Maine, was voters said they wanted it. Minnesota, unfortunately, doesn't have that option. We're not a direct balloting state, so we can't collect a bunch of signatures and put it on the ballot and then have the voters vote on it. We have to pass it through the legislature. So that's our challenge in Minnesota, to do that.
I have one comment I'd like to make, and then I'd like to ask you to comment on something. My comment is that in the Alaska election that you mentioned, it sounds like it was quite successful, but they had a primary before that. And I wonder, my comment is, I wonder if ranked choice voting works better after a primary where you limit the number of candidates somewhat. Now, I realize that's sort of self-defeating, you know, because you didn't avoid the primary, but it seems to me that it might work better if you have had some sort of primary to limit the number of candidates. I mean, having 5 people on your ballot is probably much more manageable than having 10 or more. So that's my comment. Then what I'd like you to comment on is the last Minneapolis election, and this sort of ties in with the question about can you manipulate the ranked choice voting system. And there were, in the mayoral election, there were several, but it came down to 3 progressive candidates running for mayor. There was Jacob Fry, and there were two women running to the left of Fry. And the 2 women tried to get everybody to, well, their campaign was, don't rank Fry. You know, choose between the 2 of us, and don't rank Fry. Don't rank Jacob Fry. So that was an attempt to manipulate things, and I'd like you to, well, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So the first thing on the primary, do you live in Minneapolis?
Yes.
Okay. So Minneapolis is unique in the number of candidates that run for office, all right? None of the other ranked choice voting cities have that issue with so many candidates running. Bloomington, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, the most they have is like 4 or 5 running. So it does, it does make sense to not have a primary in those cities. Now, certainly, I'm open to the idea of, primaries in places like Minneapolis where you have so many, candidates running. That is a good point to consider. And then in terms of the campaign strategies, right? So sometimes candidates will, kind of under ranked choice voting, instead of attacking each other, they're like, okay, we're really similar, so I'm gonna encourage my supporters to rank you as their second choice, and you're gonna encourage your supporters to rank me as a second choice. That's fine, they can do that. The strategy of telling voters who not to rank typically doesn't bode well for those candidates, because voters don't like being told who not to vote for, right? And they don't really like being told, like who to, whatever. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. I mean, obviously Fry won anyway, so it doesn't necessarily, but that is a campaign tactic. I don't know that it's manipulating the process at all. It's just their campaign strategy, which I don't think is a good one, but I mean, obviously candidates can try whatever they want to try, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. Are there other questions? Yes.
I have a question. Do you have a realistic estimation or goal for that would work for Minnesota to have statewide RCV?
Yes. So first of all, we're trying to get our local options bill passed, right? So we get that passed, and then hopefully more places would adopt ranked choice voting. More voters would be using ranked choice voting. And so there would be more of a demand for ranked choice voting. So there's that. We also, in the past, we've done candidate programs where we will basically, send out a, like a questionnaire to all the candidates of like statewide races or, state level race, so like state legislators, asking them, do you support ranked choice voting? Do you support it for statewide and federal elections? That sort of thing. And the candidates that say, yes, I support this stuff, we will actually help them, we'll help go door knock for them, that sort of thing. So that's another strategy that we've used to try to get more supporters of ranked choice voting at the Capitol. So, and we're seeing, as a lot of these older legislators are retiring, the people that are coming up are just more supportive in general of ranked choice voting than previous generations. So we're hopeful, yeah. And frankly, as the pain gets worse in this country, people might be more open to it that maybe weren't so open to it before, yeah.
So not this election or presidential election, but maybe the next one would be realistic?
Oh yeah, it's not gonna happen this year.
The next one.
Yeah.
That's realistic.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. But depending on what happens in this presidential election, how much of a role are those third parties going to play? Right? Because that can have an impact on the way people view this. So.
I'm curious how Norway becomes the most democratic country in the world. What is it about Norway?
I don't know. I don't do that, index, but I think I had the website up there if you wanted to go check it out and kind of read how they develop their criteria. All right, there we are. So what does it say? EIU.com, Economics Intelligence. So they're basically evaluating the democratic institutions and saying, and I think, my guess is that the United States is dropping because of things like January 6th and some other efforts that are going on in our country right now to try to suppress votes. That would be my guess.
It's time to end already.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm happy to stay a little bit later if people have additional questions, or if you want some information about the event tomorrow, or the state capitol opening event. So,
Thank
all
you
right,
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And next week, oh, where did it go? We have, of course, next week we have another program, and it is called The Illustrated Old Testament, in collaboration with the Gallery Committee of the Board of Fine Arts. And this guy, Sam Robertson, paints comical scenes depicting flawed but complex individuals